This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Hill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher will be in the house today for today's edition of Football at 4. We'll talk to Moshe. Boston Scott has signed away to the Rams, right? L.A. Rams. Boston Scott signed with the Rams last night. We'll take a look at the running back position in Philadelphia. Why were they able to let Boston Scott walk away? And I think Boston Scott was a guy who was underutilized by the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that if he was given a bigger role on this team, that he would have excelled. Not like the starter, didn't have to be the guy. But I'll tell you what, many times last year, I would rather see Boston Scott in the lineup getting reps than Kenny Gainwell. Anytime that Boston Scott was given the opportunity to do something, injuries, and a lot of times it randomly came up against the Giants. In 10 games against the Giants, over 400 yards. He piled up like 9 or 10 touchdowns in the games against the Giants. The Eagles actually tweeted out today, kind of acknowledging like, hey, Giant killer, Boston Scott, like, thanks for a great 6 years. Did you realize that Boston Scott was here for 6 years? And it's funny because, like, the shelf life of running backs doesn't seem to be a 6-year thing anymore. But the Eagles used him so sparingly that I'm sure that he can continue to rock and roll as a running back. So the fact that the Rams picked him up means the Eagles now, that running back room is very interesting. What is left in the running back room here? Now, we anticipated that Boston Scott wasn't going to be here. But what is left in the Eagles running back room? Well, we know they have Saquon Barkley, and we anticipate that Barkley will be a huge factor for this team. Then you have Kenny Gainwell. The team drafted Will Shipley. But that's really it. There's a guy named Lou Nichols on the team. So we'll talk to Moshe about that. Is Moshe going to be on the phone? Okay, he's trying to touch base with Moshe. We're scheduled to have him on the video screen for those of you watching on the Twitter X platform at 973 ESPN. By the way, we have a ton of people over there right now. You can comment, and we'll put your comments up on the screen if you want to get involved over there. The people who want to text in at 609-403-0973 can do so. But I thought it was an interesting story because, with the Sixers going on, we haven't got a chance to kind of get our hands dirty on the draft other than these Football at 4 segments, which, Will Shipley's a guy that I really liked. I think Will Shipley is a weapon. I think he's a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. I know there's some questions about his hands, and Mosher talked about this on the show on Monday, that the Eagles like him as a receiver a little bit better than maybe some other people do. But I think that Will Shipley is an interesting guy. My question is, they didn't use Boston Scott a whole heck of a lot. What kind of role is Shipley going to be able to find on a team that has Saquon Barkley and has Kenny Gainwell here? So let's go to Geoff Mosher, who is here. He's on the video stream. There you go. Those of you who are watching on the Twitter X platform at 973 ESPN. There's Geoff Mosher for Football at 4. And he joins me now. Yeah, our friend Boston Scott has signed away, Moshe. He goes to the Rams. And I bring this up because the Eagles running back room is an interesting room. You got Barkley here. You obviously spent big money there. But it's really Barkley. You got Kenny Gainwell. They drafted Will Shipley. You got Lou Nichols. But now that Boston Scott's not here, and I always thought they underused him. I thought that they didn't really utilize him enough. He always performed when given the opportunity. Like, hey, somebody's hurt. You got to play. And he always seemed to do good. Of course, it came against the Giants a lot. But give us a kind of take on how you see this running back room now and the roles of the guys, especially Shipley, who just got drafted.
Yeah, it's a new-looking room. You mentioned Saquon Barkley. He's going to be the guy for what he's paid for. It's going to be less of a committee and more of a Saquon Barkley backfield, whether that's, running the ball or catching the ball out of the backfield. Kenny Gainwell still there last year for him, and we'll see what kind of usage he gets. I agree that, especially for the fact that he was the lead, for the highest paid running back last year, that Boston Scott It's not even that it was an underusage. He was the only running back who I've ever struggled to understand when they were going to use him and what role they were going to use him for. There always seemed to be no rhyme or reason when they would put Boston Scott in the game, right? Usually, guys, a third down back, a goal line back, a short yardage back, first down back. I can't tell you how it worked out that they decided the 5 or 7 snaps that Boston Scott was going to play each game. So we'll see. Will Shipley, 5th-round pick. He's not a guy who is great at pass protection. However, he is somewhat that they want to see if they can throw the ball to a little bit and see if they can get some juice to him in the pass game. But that's a struggle when you're not that good in pass protection because then you're sort of giving a tell away. So we'll see. That's what OTAs are for. That's what training camp is for. But I think that when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley, Mike, that he gets the majority. It's kind of like when they had Miles Sanders healthy that last year. He was really the lead ball carrier. Sure, they got Gainwell in, and every once in a while they were able to get Boston Scott a carry. But I think you'll get more of a lead back here in Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I think a lot of people, Jeff, are on your page there, too, is that, hey, this guy is going to get a lot of the touches. Gainwell he didn't have a huge role last year, but I thought he had more role than I would have liked to see because he didn't seem to be very productive in the time that he was given. I mean, it seemed like they were trying to force feed him into a role, and he just never really – he felt like not the same paycheck, but it was like – Tobias Harris here. Why do you keep using Gainwell? Give someone else, give Scott those touches. It felt like Gainwell just did not have a very productive year last year.
No, and if you look at his career so far, it's not. He averages 4.4 a carry. That's pretty good. Averages 5.2 a touch. Pretty good. But I would say that there is an explosive element that we were always expecting, and not just we. Even his head coach at Memphis, Ryan Silverfield, we had him on Inside the Birds shortly after Kenneth Gainwell was drafted. And he was excited about Gainwell going to an offense like the Eagles where he thought Gainwell would be able to catch the ball and really show what he showed at Memphis, which was being a guy who was almost as much of a receiver as he was a running back. And that really hasn't materialized. I will say, I think Kenneth Gainwell has given us onlookers a lot more of a between the tackles presence than we ever thought he would, a short yardage presence, because that was not the book on him coming out of Memphis. And that's been nice at times, but the explosion that they've been looking for in catching the ball and making people miss, it just never manifested, or at least hasn't yet.
Yeah, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. And then, I look at the role that Boston Scott has had here over the years, minimal. Last year, I think he only had 20 carries on the entire season, if I remember from writing the article last night. Does Will Shipley jump into the Scott role, or does he compete with Kenny Gainwell as that other guy?
I mean, I think that's an answer that's left to be seen in OTAs and training camp. He's got some juice to him. There's no doubt about it. If they feel like he can catch the ball more than he did at Clemson and he shows that, that's a feather in the cap. If his pass protection can improve, there have been guys who've come out, and Dallas Goedert's a perfect example. Didn't block at South Dakota State. Well, what we found out is he wasn't asked to block at South Dakota State, and he wound up actually being pretty good at it once he got his reps in. If Will Shipley is someone who can show some refinement that maybe you didn't see because it wasn't asked of him at Clemson, that gives him an opportunity to leap up the chart. I mean, I think after Saquon Barkley, there's an open door for anybody who performs well because you just don't have a bunch of guys who have really proven very much.
Moshe, let's get into – I want to get your opinion on the linebacking situation here. You've got Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who is here, another Clemson guy. How does that work out? Is he competing with Dean? Does he compete with Devin White? Do you see a scenario where it's Dean and Trotter and White's the odd man out here? Or is it just, hey, Dean and Trotter, the best man wins? Is it only one linebacker on the field? Does Cooper DeJean become kind of a big nickel and he gets more? What do you make of how Trotter fits in and this linebacking core now that the dust has settled after the draft?
I tell you what I've talked to some people, but I would also say it's an educated guess. I think after watching the Eagles last year, Mike, And when you're specifically talking about the back seven, we're talking here not about first down, right? We're talking about pass defense with these linebackers and these corners and these safeties. The lack of athleticism was so glaring last year. And it really didn't matter what package they were in. They tried everything, right? They tried nickel, they tried dime, they tried big nickel. They're throwing extra safety. There were times they were throwing Sidney Brown in as the third safety before he got hurt. That wasn't great because he's not really a great coverage guy. There were times they were throwing in Ringo and Ricks and trying to give you a dime look with one linebacker because they had injuries. But no matter what combination of seven they put out there to cover, it wasn't really good because they were slow. They weren't very athletic from linebacker to safety to corner outside of maybe Slay, who can still play a little bit. I would imagine that with Vic Fangio here and with a bunch of new bodies at corner, safety, and linebacker, they're going to look at a bunch of different packages. Like you mentioned, Cooper DeJean. What a perfect kind of guy to say, hey, we can put him at either nickel or safety, corner. We can move him around in different sub-packages. So let's see what our best coverage seven looks like. And if that's really a big key for improvement, then Jeremiah Trotter is probably going to have a difficult time getting on the field because he's not blessed with great speed. He's not blessed with great size. In fact, speaking to some people, since he's been drafted, the whole idea that he was a third or fourth rounder that slipped to the fifth round, I was told today was more of a media scout mentality than the NFL. The NFL viewed him right where he went. So, and that's usually where your slower linebackers go. Great instincts. He knows the game, obviously has the bloodlines, but the feeling I got, the vibe I got is like, if he's out there and you're nickel, you're dot, whatever kind of linebacker, he's going to be a liability against guys who can run, which is pretty much everybody in the NFL these days.
Yeah, that I think that's going to be interesting. Is Trotter, is Dean the guy they want to play? Does he automatically get that job, based off of last year? I mean, he got handed that job last year, essentially. I mean, they brought in a couple guys, but they handed him the job, and then he couldn't hold up. So is he, in your mind, Nakobe Dean gets a job no matter what? He's the guy.
I mean, he has to be for what, they drafted him in the third round. They need year 3 of Nakobe Dean to be a year if they decide where he's going to be a good player in this defense and, maybe get an extension after the year if he deserves it, or if not, maybe after next year. But, it's sort of like the Jordan Davis conversation. You got to be on the field. You got to be healthy. You got to prove that you are who we thought you were. I imagine he'll get every opportunity. They're not blessed with unbelievable linebackers to go steal his job. In fact, you can almost say there's a little bit of a pick your poison here with a guy like Devin White, who I mentioned Devin White is a guy who's very fast, right? He is the kind of guy you ideally want in your back seven as a coverage linebacker, whether you're a nickel or dime. But he's also known for being reckless, for being out of place, being freelancer. So do you want that? Or do you want Trotter, who probably has better instincts, but may not be able to keep with some of those guys?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very interesting storyline as we get to these, the training camps. Does the team just say Dean's the guy here? Did they draft Trotter to push him? Did they draft Trotter to start? Did they sign White and give him any sort of indication that he's going to have a definitive role here? That's another thing, Jeff. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of the White signing from people saying, hey, he can't really play. He's undisciplined. He's out of place. Does he have any guarantees that he plays?
I mean, the contract, the 1-year contract says nothing's guaranteed, but there is guaranteed money in it. There are incentives to get it up to a decent level. So it clearly shows you they want him to be a starting linebacker. He will open the season as a starting linebacker. It's enough to make me believe that he will, he'd have to fall on his face or get hurt or be terrible. When they signed Terrell Edmunds last year, Mike, it was like $600,000 guaranteed money. So that told me right away that Terrell Edmunds may not come out of training camp as the starting safety. I don't care that he was a first-round pick. I don't care that he started 5 years for the Steelers. Me and Adam made this point over and over again. And, of course, we got a lot of backlash on that because he's Terrell Edmunds. He's a first-round pick. He's a Steeler. He started all 5 years. Well, guess what? When the season started, he was not the starting safety. It was Justin Evans instead, along with, I think, Reed Blankenship. So, but with Devin White, I do believe he'd have to really have such a terrible camp, and Vic Fangio would have to say, I can't see this guy anymore for something to happen. So he'll be the guy.
We're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I want to get your take on where do you see Cooper DeJean's role in this defense? Because a lot of people just think safety, right? And when you look at this room, you would think that makes the most sense, right? They could use another safety. They drafted a corner in the first round. They have Bradbury. They have Slay. And they got a boatload of other corners in that room. Do you see him lining up at safety right away?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're not asking me, do I see him starting at safety, right? You're just asking, do I think he'll play some safety in year one? Yeah, I do. I think he might play
either one.
nickel.
Either one. Like, is it him and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Are they the pair?
That's a great question, Mike. Second-round picks, usually you put them on the field right away unless there's somebody better than them higher on the depth chart. Like Cam Jurgens had a weighty year, right? And then last year, who was last year's second-round pick? I already forgot.
Last year's second-round pick for the Eagles was, let's see. I'll get it for you. Go ahead.
They took they didn't have one, right? They took Carter and Nolan Smith. But let's sort of talk about Nolan Smith because he was the 30th overall pick, which is sort of like closer to the second round than being a first-rounder. He didn't start right away because he had Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat in front of him. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I think it's tough to start both C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Cooper DeJean because –
Third round pick, by the way, was Tyler Steen.
Right, and he didn't start right away.
Yep.
I think DeJean will play a lot. I'm not 100% sure he'll start, but then all he really has to do is be better than, say, Reed Blankenship, right? And be able – they need to be able on first down to feel comfortable with putting DeJean and Chauncey Gardner at safety when they're both kind of that versatile type. Neither of them really – outstanding box safeties. So I don't know that he's going to have a definite entry into the starting lineup.
So, right now, would you say Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship would be the top two guys on the depth chart when we enter camp?
Yes, yeah. I would say that's
because I was talking to McMullen this morning, and he had said the scouts had said that they had scouted DeJean as an outside corner specifically when they looked at him. So that was interesting to me that they were looking at him as an outside corner. Does he fit as an outside corner right away on this team? I don't know. Do you say, hey, you and Quinyon Mitchell battle it out, and if you're better than Bradbury, we'll cut him?
It's possible. Again, he's got the abilities to play a lot of positions. It's just, again, someone I spoke to today felt that in the Eagles defense with Vic Fangio, his long-term future is at safety. Now, it doesn't mean like Malcolm Jenkins started – right, as a corner and then eventually moved to safety. But he started out as a corner in a Tampa 2 defense where you always have, that safety behind you to give you that backup. Vic does play a lot of quarters and too high, so you are protected if you're an outside corner. But he also rolls those safeties post-snap a lot and leaves you one high. So I think that, again, it's what do you see at camp? What do you see at in the preseason games, and how can you best maneuver him?
Because my question for you, Moshe, would be if you have Mitchell and he's good enough to play, and you sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you know what you have with him, a playmaking guy, turnover guy. Cooper DeJean is known for playmaking, turnovers. You could have three guys in your secondary that you didn't have last year that really cause a lot of havoc back there if you just say, you know what? I don't care. I don't care if we play him outside safety or safety. Once he's in the building, he's ours. We'll play him wherever the heck we get the most out of him.
Yeah, don't forget about nickel and what you brought up before, which is sub packages. I mean, at some point, when you're in a sub package, you're a defensive back because it's hard to tell whether you're playing a safety role, a corner role, or a nickel role, right? Unless you're on the outside. But there have been so many occasions, like Corey Graham, the Super Bowl year. He was like a corner who had played safety. He was a safety who had been corner. He was an interior defensive back, which is like a slot corner. So at that point, the title goes out the window. You're just on the field and you're in coverage. And when Sidney Brown comes back, Mike, that makes it really interesting. In fact,
you almost forget about him.
Sidney Brown comes back healthy. It's like I had a joke with Andrew DeCecco. He did his depth chart today, projected depth chart defense for our website. Tomorrow will be offense. And I'm looking at safeties, and I'm like, wow, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Sidney Brown when healthy, Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship's a good 3. That makes Reed where he belongs, like a 3rd or 4th safety. And then you start looking at defensive tackle, right? And after you get through Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, you're like, there's Marlon. Like when you get to the backups after Milton Williams, it's Marlon Tuipulotu, it's P.J. Mustafer, it's Thomas Booker, it's Moro Ojomo. And I thought, holy cow, what kind of world are we living in where the Eagles have more depth at safety than defensive tackle?
I'll tell you what, that was a surprise for me in the draft, Moch, that they didn't take a defensive tackle in the draft. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I'd be stunned if they went into training camp with the guys I just mentioned as the only defensive tackle backups.
Milton Williams have a bigger role this year, or do they look for somebody else to take some more of those Fletcher Cox snaps?
Who? Thomas Booker?
Well, I mean, we know that after June, you'll probably get some veteran guys, cut.
No, the only one guy would be Moro Ojomo because they drafted him in the 7th round last year. He's got a good motor. I mean, they felt he was a higher value.
Loved him at Texas, man. I love that kid at Texas. He was awesome.
Yeah. So he's got a shot. He'll probably have to earn that like Milton did, which is in sub packages and showing off that interior burst in the pass rush. If they can get him on the field in the pass rush between all the edge rushers that they have and whatever maneuverability they're going to do.
I'm okay with Williams getting more snaps, by the way. I'm not asking it in a way of like, oh, my God, they're stuck with Milton Williams. I would like to see him get those snaps.
Well, he's going to start. I mean, he actually started last year when they came out in their 5-2 formation. So there were times he started. He's going to start now. It's going to be Jordan Davis flanked by Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. That's your interior 3. And then you're going to have Bryce Huff as a stand-up outside linebacker on one side, and then Josh Sweat on the other side.
All right, last one for Moshe. If they had a game tomorrow, who's lining up in the slot right now?
Avonte Maddox.
No, on offense.
Oh.
Who's your third wide receiver?
Oh, man, that is such a – you know what? If they had to play tomorrow, right, it's sort of an easy question to answer because to me that would be – Paris Campbell because he's played slot and that, you got a couple of rookies here in Johnny Wilson and Aeneas Smith who haven't shown you anything. But I will tell you guys this. All right. The Eagles really like these 2 guys that they drafted, Aeneas Smith and Johnny Wilson, right? For various reasons. One's 5'9", the other's 6'7". It's like the movie Twins.
Yeah, I say it's going to look great. It's going to look great at rookie camp when those 2 guys are battling for the same position.
They absolutely need to take a picture with each other, like back-to-back, arms folded, so in a little poster. But they really like those guys, and both of them are known in their own way with their body types to bring a little bit of toughness to that position and some talent to it. Paris Campbell's been talented, but he's also been in the league for a while, and he's always injured. And, last year he could barely get on the field with the Giants. So I wouldn't be sure. You're asking me if they played today, who would be the slot. But on the opening week, who against the Packers in Brazil, would not shock me at all if one of those 2 guys, I don't know about started, but got some good run in the slot.
All right, Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can get that on all podcasting platforms. Check out their YouTube shows and, of course, all their content on the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. And you can always check out Football at 4, the podcast on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel as well as right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher, everybody. Thank you, man.
You got it, man. Talk to you Monday.
All right. Mosher's back on Monday with more Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.